Hello, one and all. Jasper here, joined again for our discussion on Alicent, this time with the brothers Kerr.
Yep.
All right. Now,
And hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. So before we start, I'll just say don't forget to smash that subscribe button over here because very important. Let's get Jasper's channel up to 2,000.
and hey, if you like what you're listening to this, you can just head on over to the brothers Kern channel. There'll be a link in the description down below where you can actually hear our discussions on other characters. In this case, our little pair up, the video on this will be about Alicent, and his video will be on Rhaenyra. So make sure to check that one out, but right after this. Now, in regards to Alicent, and I think for me, like, Alicent is probably one of the most different characters compared to the book counterpart.
Yeah, she's very interesting in both.
Mm-hmm.
And she, okay, I'll say this: the show makes her very tragic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not gonna lie. Although, I mean, no offense, but the show gave me the impression of a woman who's mentally imbalanced by her very nature. But the book is like at first I just thought, wow, what a witch when I first read it. But then when I reread it and then looked up some of the tinfoil hat theories some things came up with, and then started perusing the book for that, like with that in mind, I kind of went, oh, yeah, there's a way of reading her to make her seem more tragic than what she seems at first glance. So Alicent's not like at first glance she's a clear cut character, but when you start to look at her more closely, she's a much more tragic character than what one might expect.
Is
And
it
she's also a lot more wicked, witchy than at first glance as well.
okay? Interesting, because because Alicent is kind of one of the characters. Like, I don't know if you've heard this. I feel like we might have discussed this before, but reading like Fire and Blood, I've heard been described as a pro green book. You know, like it was because the Greens kind of won in a way that, and would like it's supposed to be written by someone who is pro green, and so it's almost like a
Yeah,
propaganda piece. I th- like I don't know
yeah,
who said that. I want to say it was Preston Jacobs, who's kind of the big name, who said that before. I
it is.
vehemently disagree with that statement because, and I bring this up because Allison's like the real first green we've been able to talk about, but in general the greens are just not that likable in the books in almost any way for me.
No.
The one
Well,
exception is Aegon and Helena, but even Aegon gets kind of twisted and messed up by the end.
well, he's a very complicated character. He's got reasons for why he becomes the way he does.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to discuss him when we get to him. And because I just insist on that because we could spend so much time just discussing him. Helena, obviously, yeah, I'm actually, like, Helena's very interesting in the show. But, anyways, like in the book, it doesn't even, she's not terribly interesting, but in the show she is.
Yeah.
Alicent, at the start, is basically besties with Rhaenyra. And one thing I did not touch upon in the Rhaenyra video, now I kind of want to mention right now. Um, well, in the book, Alicent was first brought to court and had a bit of a relationship of sorts, reading to Jaehaerys and kind of helping him bathe and basically playing nursemaid to him
Mm-hmm.
while he was in his final senile months and possibly years. Alicent having a bond with Rhaenyra, like whether as a initially loving stepmother or as a bestie in the show, is a much more interesting relationship than the Jaehaerys one. I'm just going to be honest. I find that possibility way more interesting because, as you noted, there's a lot more of a story to tell here.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to come out of the gate and say I really like the idea of the Maester conspiracy with the idea of Alicent being the daughter of, according to the Order of the Green Hand, Sarah, the worst of Jaehaerys' daughters, and Otto. And the only reason I like that possibility is that, to me, it. I've got my own theory about Alicent later, but it also makes Alicent in a way much more tragic because she was basically bred to be a weapon against the Targs and wasn't given the choice, so that she was from birth all but drafted into this. And the tragic thing about that is that the Hightowers would have used her for the dance and then toss her away when she outlived her usefulness to some extent without a care. And this just wraps her in a bit of a Greek tragedy. And that would make the falling out with Rhaenyra, to my mind, a little more tragic. And then after everything has kind of gone the way it has, it leaves Alicent a much, much more melancholic character in a way. And you can disagree with me if you, Jasper, but I just. But on the other hand, I like to read it in that she was bred for this purpose, but this doesn't mean she wasn't without emotion. That maybe she did for a time come to care for Rhaenyra, maybe even Viserys, and that, you know, there's much more to her relationships than just maester weapon. And that she only got on board when, you know, like, when there was kind of almost, she was basically cornered into the role. Because let's be honest, Rhaenyra totally would have destroyed her younger siblings when she came to the throne. So
especially in the book,
it kind of, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, so okay, Alicent may not have been fully willing to jump in with this conspiracy her dad was in on, but could she really say no after she's basically mothered a single child for her husband? You know what I mean? Like, it becomes a much more nuanced thing when you consider that. At least that's how I've read the text.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, an interesting theory to say the least. I mean, I think you and I are both in agreement as regards to the Maester conspiracy. I mean, I'm not the theorist guy. Mostly, I consider myself more of the casual Game of Thrones fan in that regard. Like, it took me forever to even learn about R plus L equals J. So that's not my that's not my cup of tea per se. I will say though, the idea that she was bred and like specifically for this, I think that's a little bit out there. I mean, there's the long game, and then there's holy shit.
Well, what I mean is, I think that the goal may have been that Otto may have had when vetting Sarah would have been for a son, but what popped out was a daughter. And from there, they had to adapt their plan. That's what I think. Like, it was not exactly like they had the entire thing mapped out. I think that it was semi-clumsily done, and they had to adapt to different circumstances, such as Daemon and whatnot. And yeah, that's at least my point of view on it. That said, when it comes to R plus J,
R plus L,
yeah, the trouble. Now, I remember originally having a theory. Rhaegar thought it was his, but Jon Snow, I thought it was funny when reading it into the text. No, she betted Robert, then later she ended up betting Rhaegar. And that Jon may actually be Robert's son. I thought that would have been funny. Had she thought it was Rhaegar's. Ned thought it was Rhaegar's. Rhaegar's thought it was Rhaegar's, but it was really Robert's. I thought that would have been the funniest thing ever. So that it is technically R plus L equals J.
I haven't heard that one, but it's interesting at least. But considering how long the war was going on, it seems very unlikely.
I know. It was a random thought I had at the time when first reading. Then went, no, that doesn't make any sense. But
it's not.
That said, I never liked the.
It's not the worst one I've ever heard. I've heard of L plus B equals J, or no, L plus A equals J. Like, there's so many. Like, oh god, the worst one is R plus L equals D. Do you know what that means?
No.
Rhaegar plus Lyanna Stark equals Daenerys Targaryen.
That's a weird one.
I hate that one
Well,
so much, but we're getting off topic. This is
well,
supposed to be
no, I
Alicent's
was gonna
video.
end it, what I was gonna end it with saying was just that ironically I had the thought also that when I after I dismissed the Robert thought was maybe John was actually genuinely Ned's bastard. And that would have been the funniest thing if everyone's like, "Oh, he must be Rhaegar's." No, it turns out he is Ned's.
Now,
Ned did genuinely break marriage vows.
yeah, and
That would have been
his mother was Bessie.
yeah.
Cause thank the gods for Bessie and her tits. But anyways, back
Yeah.
to the original topic of this video being Alicent. So yeah, the whole kind of Maester conspiracy and how it intertwines with the High Towers is definitely interesting. I've always kind of put more so the Maesters as their own kind of group. I don't know how much the High Towers specifically are connected, because obviously there are just some general powerful connections between the Maesters, the Citadel, and the High Towers, as well as the Faith. I think the Faith's main base used to be in Old Town before King's Landing started to be built up. But so I've always just kind of considered the Maesters more so their own faction and the High Towers their own, with a lot of similarities given their close proximity. But
No.
I don't know how much the High Towers would be going gung ho with the Maesters.
Ironically, always had the weird theory that the High Towers were not gung ho for it.
Mm-hmm.
May not have even known till around the time of Otto being the second son or so. Maybe he was kind of brought into the idea, and he would have been one of the first High Towers to be gung ho for it. That was always my theory, and that what he got out of it, well, he got to father essentially a half Targ and
So I actually want
his
to.
grandchildren on the front.
I actually want to double check with that. So you're saying that Alicent is half Targaryen, right?
Well, this theory would suggest that she is the daughter of Sarah Targaryen.
Okay, because I don't know how much I buy that, because the whole thing is that we actually don't know who Otto's wife was before she passed away.
Yeah, that's cool. But I always thought that it meant Alicent was illegitimate.
I mean, it's colorful, it's interesting, but it does not strike me as a very likely one.
I guess. I just find it an amusing little theory that enriches the world.
But with that, getting back to Alicent specifically, so...
Well, even if we... Now, I was going to say, dismissing this possible backstory, the thing is she was brought to King's Landing to read to Jaehaerys and take care of him, and to cozy up to Viserys and catch his eye. In the show, I'm going to be honest, I actually kind of like how they first start to bond. Him over his model city, and her kind of reading to him like she used to do to Jaehaerys. And so that one could almost see, like, I know that the show and the book are different, but let's say we read into the show that at least that similar backstory that she used to read to the old king, that maybe Viserys is kind of gaining a kinship of sorts to his own grandfather. By listening to her read to him, maybe he's thinking about his grandpa to an extent, and he's beginning to understand the old man better, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just real quick, I just remembered there was one detail about the Sarah theory. It's because I believe sorry for going back to that. The original theory apparently has to do with the fact that Jaehaerys mistook Alicent for Sarah.
Oh, I see. Okay, so yeah, definitely interesting. That definitely adds to it. But the issue is the High Towers in general already seem to have quite Valyrian features. Like, for example, in the books, while her appearance is never described, it's pretty much theorized that Alicent Hightower has blonde hair or even silver hair, as that's the only hair the Targaryens have been, or the Targaryens, sorry, the High Towers have been described in the books as far as literature goes.
Yep. So, anyways, but as to Alicent, she wasn't originally she did not originally clash with Rhaenyra to an extent, but it's not till in the book, at least, she's married and that she begins to sully her very young stepdaughter's reputation, and from there the relationship just falls apart because wicked stepmother. Whereas in the show, it's a slow and steady
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I still think it's very unlikely because specifically with Sarah, I think she was already in Essos before Alicent was born.
Well, the date is actually open because she doesn't appear in Essos till some time after Alicent would have been born.
Because I know the scandal was in
Anyway.
84 AC, Alicent's birth was 88 AC.
Okay, yeah, so there seems to be a problem with the theory.
Yeah. But it's still interesting at the very least.
Well, still, he could have... Well, actually, let me check that. I'll have to check that out later.
Yeah. Well, either way, that as far as at the moment, it doesn't hold a whole lot of credence to Alicent in either the show, especially the show, because there's no mention or kind of hinting towards that in any way, which, to be fair,
yeah,
of course, because nobody, if they start mentioning, like, your daughter, you are the daughter of Sira, or however you pronounce it, like, that's not going to mean anything to the audience. But now, so this is probably one of the situations where, and we're probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I think that's just because there's not a lot to go in on Alicent in the books. Like, bitchy stepmother, that's about it. And unlike the show, which really seems to be, granted, it's just the first season, but the show really kind of plays up the confrontation and rivalry between Rhaenyra and Alicent.
Oh,
whereas,
wait, real quick. Sarah seems to have disappeared across the Narrow Sea, but she was first in Old Town, then disappeared, and she doesn't appear until years later.
Okay.
So, well, she ends up leaving quite some time later for across the Narrow Sea, but she's not mentioned as being across the Narrow Sea till years later. So there's an entire couple years. Oh, there's the first mention of her seems to be in the 90s AC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a few years. Okay, so from 84 to about 99 AC, there's an entire.
So we have a decade of her being in Old Town?
No, we have a decade of her being missing.
Okay.
Or not. We don't know. And then she leaves for Volantis in 99 AC, where she becomes a madam. And
you're right.
1 AC.
So yeah, so she disappeared in 85 AC. So she was in Old Town for about a year and about 3 years before Alicent was born. So so with that gap, it's possible she was still kind of hiding out in Old Town. It seems unlikely, though, that she would eventually then get to the situation where she would sleep with Otto Hightower.
Well, yeah.
But anyways,
maybe. Who cares?
We can save this debate and discussion for a special video in this regard. But with Alicent, with Alicent, I think in the books there's just not a lot to go off of her because eventually, especially when the dance really kicks off, the book seems to shift more towards the confrontation and rivalry between Rhaenyra and Aegon rather than Rhaenyra and Alicent. The show definitely seems to be going more towards Rhaenyra versus Alicent, though, but we'll see. Maybe in the coming seasons, Aegon will be more prominent and focused on more in his confrontations.
I hope they also deepen his character because he was boring in the show.
Yeah, I'm not we can talk about him in his own episode. But however, unlike Aegon, though, I have to say that me personally, I greatly prefer Alicent in the show compared to the book.
Well, I found that weirdly I prefer her in the book. I just find it's just the book. Like, you can always crack the book open and read it from different perspectives. That's the strength of the novel. That said, what I like about the show is that we do get a pretty good, complicated story about it. And we do. The only thing is, she seems to almost turn on Rhaenyra just for no reason, like 1 second to the next. That's where I have a problem with the show to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
That said, because we do have to bear in mind, like when Rhaenyra says, "All right, let's drop the rivalry. How about we engage our, we try to promise members of our house together to one another." Alicent has no reason to refuse, but she does refuse. That said, the most glaring problem in the show, though, with Alicent is the scene where she tries to take a dagger on Rhaenyra, because that makes no sense.
Well,
That
no.
makes no sense.
Well, you actually have to see that Alicent may not have a reason to refuse,
No,
but she
like,
doesn't have a reason to accept either, because Rhaenyra was
yeah,
offering her son to the daughter. The daughter was never a threat to begin with to Rhaenyra's train.
yep. That said, as for the dagger scene, I was just going to say, as a medievalist, as say someone who studied medieval history, the trouble is that that scene we cannot consider in canon because you drew a dagger against the crown, the heir to the crown. Since this is fantasy England, she will be hung, drawn, and quartered, and she will have, or since she's a woman, she'll just be hanged or have her head chopped off.
Well,
Which,
while Westeros is heavily inspired by, 15th century England, specifically around the period of the War of the Roses, I think, she wouldn't be the first person in history to break the law and get away scot-free. And if anyone is going to break the law and get away scot-free, it's going to be the wife to the king. Especially with a character along the lines of Viserys.
well, even then, I don't see it because, well, I'm looking at 12th century, no wait, 13th century England with Henry III, who was a pushover. But when a man kind of did that sort of thing, he got, well, his innards ripped out. And I'm just saying, like, the softness of kings historically could be pretty harsh and gruesome.
Oh yeah, but this is a special case. Are there any situations where, it was the king's a family situation along those lines? Because that's the whole thing. They're both technically royalty at this point. Like
No
if
wife would ever draw a blade against even her stepchildren
oh yeah,
because she'd be dead. There'd be no quarter shown ever. It never happened
well then
because
this
the woman had enough not to do it.
well yeah. So then this is obviously, especially in regards to this being a different culture and different area, it's somewhat circumstantial. Like we can assume all we want, but there's no evidence, at least in this regard, of something similar happen.
But that said, one wife who had cheated on her husband when he was still a prince was later strangled to death, and the prince did not face any problems in the law. So,
Oh yeah,
like
that
the
would,
most similar. Yeah, I'm just saying that scene I don't consider part of the canon, so I'm just bringing it up because it is controversial
yeah, okay.
and it bears mentioning, I think, because it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. At least
Like,
with kind of how it
I'm just looking at
is, yeah. But the whole thing is how I kind of look at it in Westeros. A lot of the laws kind of seem to be dictated by the king. Like even laws that have always been withstanding, it depends on who's in charge and how much they're enforced. For example, one of the scenes I hate the most in the show is that jousting scene. Where suddenly this massive bloody brawl breaks out between everyone, and people are just watching it like
That would,
nonchalantly. That
that
shit.
would not happen.
Well, not only would that not happen, it would especially not happen under Viserys' rule. This was a guy who got pissed during accidental deaths. There's no way his city would allow this in any way. But,
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
but, if, say, Maegor the Cruel or Joffrey Baratheon was in charge, then it strikes me as far more likely and reasonable for this shit to fly. So that's the whole thing. The written law goes only so far as to what the king wants to enforce. And in the situation with Alicent and Rhaenyra, I totally believe that Viserys had no interest in actually pushing that, especially given that Alicent was in the position where her son just lost his eye and could be, given the excuse of being distraught and thus more pitiable.
Yeah, but for me, at least, it destroys all suspension of disbelief because I'm just I'm reading the fantasy from the perspective of medieval historian, and I'm just staring askance and going, "What the heck is going on?" I'm confused. So there's no laws, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, it's whatever the monarch says it is or dictates. That makes no sense to my mind. Then they're not laws; they're decrees and rules that the monarch makes up as he's going along. Like, it's just that part of things. I'm like, I have no idea what this means for this society. And I know I'm being a little whiny about it. It's just that's something that I don't know if like it doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, I mean,
There would
just think of it like
be
in modern times. Like
tradition
in modern times, there's all
because
sorts of public
well,
officials, whether it be celebrities or very just wealthy individuals, who are able to skirt the law because of their own influence and whatnot. So it
fair
just
enough.
depends on who's in charge and who makes the shots. That being Viserys, who
But
has the final say.
I just meant, I just meant that in the medieval period and 15th century England, you're looking at law which is based on precedent,
Oh yeah,
legal precedent.
and
So, like, oh, well, 400 years ago, this is how it was done, so we have to always do it that way. That's always the mindset of medieval law.
yeah, and
And we can't skirt around it. But the problem is, and the king has limits to his authority in every country. It's not till much later with the French monarchs that you had absolute monarchism that showed up, and that was a mess.
oh yeah, but keep in mind, Viserys. This isn't the first law that Viserys has decided to ignore. That's been a strong precedent.
True. Very true.
All right,
Very true.
all right. But with
But
that, since we are kind of like talking a lot on Alicent and these kind of actions, I have to say, for the most part, I enjoyed Alicent and I was very sympathetic to her because she felt torn. Like she really wanted to like help her friend, and she was insistent like you don't got to worry about anything between us, all that. So much is going like spying for Rhaenyra like on her father and whatnot. As Otto like explained it, you chose her over me. It's just like
well,
because of the connection, I'm just far more sympathetic to her and how she's torn between her friendship and her family. It's someone who doesn't want this, but just because of how the society is at the time, she's kind of forced to eventually pick a side.
yeah. In the latter half of the season, though, she doesn't seem very torn.
Oh no, because
Um,
after, especially like after her son lost her eye, she's full blown green. That's like her big heel turn, for lack of a better word.
yeah. Um, that said, um, this might sound harsh. Where I lost all sympathy for the Greens for the most part was when Viserys said, "If not for what was it? Like if only for the love of this sickly old man, will you not make peace? I beg of you." Like that supper scene. That's where I found, yeah, okay, you know what? I can't wait for Allison to get what's coming to her, because to me it was like you can at least pretend for the old man's sake.
Well, they did, didn't they?
And
Alicent and Rhaenyra both
no,
raised their
not
cups.
really. It's pretty yeah, but it's pretty obvious. No,
Well, no.
there's going to be no peace, especially
Well,
with Aemond then starting up a fight.
oh yeah, that
But
that wasn't Alicent. That was
that's why,
Aemond.
yeah, Aemond's just crazy. But but
But
that's what I love about him.
yeah, but I
He's
did.
the bad guy.
Yeah, but I disagree
Evil.
with you that Alicent, at least in the show, had no intention of peace. I think she was, at that moment, willing to step aside. It was just that until when she heard Viserys and how he was speaking about the prophecy, but she misinterpreted what he was saying and actually saying that it was Aegon who was supposed to sit the Iron Throne from his visions. I think that was the
Well,
moment.
this is where I'm actually going to ask: from whose perspective are we seeing that scene?
My perspective.
No, what I mean is like
Don't you
uh
start using the George R. R. Martin excuse. Like, oh, it was a biased source. No, 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 no. In
no,
this,
that's not what I mean.
in the history book
No, that
bullshit, you can get away with that, but not in the actual show, unless they're just straight out lying to us of how it played out.
no, I meant Alicent is lying to us. She wanted to hear that, so she heard that. This where what if Viserys didn't actually say that?
Yeah,
Because we're looking at that scene through the filter of Alicent.
yeah, and I can understand
Like the
that.
entire
We know what Viserys is actually saying, so I know that she's misinterpreting what his words are. But let's be fair, if you heard that and had no idea about the damn prophecy because your husband never told you about it, you'd probably think the same thing. Obviously, her own motivations and bias influenced it, just like every other human being.
What I mean is, maybe he didn't even mention Aegon, but she imagined he did. Basically, she's crazy.
Then all the scenes we watch are useless. We can't trust any of them because so yeah, we can't believe that Rhaenyra actually tried. Oh god, we can't believe this. We can't believe that. That's through someone else's lie. You get off your fucking high horse. I'm getting sick of the bullshit coming out of your mouth right now.
Sorry. But anyways, looking at the scene at face value. That said, this is when she finally decides there will be no king. Now, I'll just say that the Green's actions after that scene, and even with that scene, makes complete sense. They want Aegon on the throne, so they're going to put him on the throne. That makes sense. Heck, I'm going to be honest. Aegon's not a worse monarch than Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is just
I will say,
shit show.
Show Aegon might be worse than Show Rhaenyra.
What?
The only thing, like, he's guilty of everything Rhaenyra is, but he was just lucky enough he was born a guy, so the issue of bastardy isn't that big of a deal. That's like, because this is the guy who goes and watches children, I think some of them are his bastard children, fight with filed teeth in the slums of Flea Bottom. Like,
fair enough.
Like, he is definitely worse in the show.
Yes, but here's the thing. His mother can slap him around, and he basically leaves everything to his grandpa and his younger brother, Aemond. And I just destroyed my argument because just Aemond being the power behind the throne is scary. So never mind.
And how?
Yeah, you're right.
And how long could they tell him what to do? Because that was the whole thing with Joffrey. Cersei, for a little while, as Tyrion said, it's hard to put a leash on a dog when you put a crown on its head. Once Aegon's coronated, he doesn't have to. He's a ticking time bomb at that moment when he realizes he doesn't have to listen to his parents or grandparents.
Yeah, it's basically like the Tudors line. God have mercy on the soul of any man who informs the king he can do whatever he wants. Or something to that effect. It's like, yeah. So you're absolutely right. I just needed a moment to work through it mentally. Now I'm going, oh, yeah, he's worse in the show. In the
books. In the books, it's a little bit different.
He's not great. He's not even mediocre. He's actually a bad monarch. But comparing him to Rhaenyra, okay, this is hard. Rhaenyra's not good. Neither is he. They both suck. But it's about a matter of who sucks less.
So in the books, it's hard to say because the whole thing with Aegon, like Rhaenyra, really did kind of show off that she wasn't that great, despite being groomed to take over. Whereas Aegon, at least in the books, it seems like he wasn't being groomed in any way to take the throne. So he was just partying, being lecherous, whoring around, all that stuff. Like I said, I think it was written, it might have been one of the History and Lords video, but I think it might have been Fire and Blood as well, where he was surprised that he was being named king. He was like, what the hell? No, it's my sister. What kind of brother steals his sister's throne? That's a dick move right there.
yeah, it's only the fear for his own children that
Yeah,
pushes him to take the throne.
yeah, which is why I'm
And
personally more of a fan of the sympathetic interpretation of Aegon. Like, I believe more of the sympathetic aspects to him rather
yeah,
than the more lecherous, hedonistic aspects of him.
I'm going to be honest. I was hoping they'd go with Book Aegon,
Yeah,
and but Alicent in the show is like she when it comes time to crown Aegon. Now, I'm actually going to be honest. I'm going to defend her actions and say politically she's doing what she needs to. Also, personally, she needs to save her bacon. But the okay, now we arrive near the end. Like the Rhaena scene where she marches her dragon into the throne room makes no sense to me. Why do that and not roast them all?
that
Like
didn't happen in
the
the books. As far as I'm aware, that scene can go straight to hell. We can talk about that on the Valarion or if she gets her own episode. Because if we start talking
yeah,
about that, I'm not going to stop spitting on it.
yeah, same. I hate that scene. But um, we can't. Okay, so we already know which ones we prefer. I prefer book. Allison, you prefer show.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just quickly, briefly talk about the virtues of show, Allison, as well. Um, we actually get to kind of see her grow into her role. And I'm going to be honest, it's her relationship with her dad in the show is more fleshed out. In the book, it's not fleshed out. And in the show, there's a very complicated bond between the two because she does clearly worship and adore him. On the other hand, he's such a political animal like Tywin that it's overwhelming for him. So, in that regard, that makes her much more sympathetic when she's around Otto Hightower,
Yeah.
whom is just such an ass. Like, sorry, he's just so um, fundamentally terrible a person, and and yeah, it's hard to tell if he even sees her as human. So she has that in her backstory. Like she clearly wants a relationship with her dad, but he's not the sort of guy you have a relationship with. He's toxic, and yeah, that bond I found very fascinating to see on the screen.
Yeah, I did as well. I wonder what's the motivations, and we can go we'll have a field day with Otto Hightower because I think there's a lot to go over with him and his actions and his
Oh
choices
yeah,
and his motivation as well. But yeah, definitely the
yeah.
relationship between her and her father. I will say though, it's still a better relationship than the Lannister kids had with Tywin.
Oh yes. Like
So
Tywin is
congratulations, Otto. You're only like the fourth worst dad in Westeros.
yeah, yeah. Then you've got Alicent with her kids. Clearly, she's not a great mom uh, to Aegon. Aemond, I will not hold against her. I will continue to maintain my opinion. He's a psychopath, so that's kind of outside her power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only reason I say it's kind of outside her power is that psychopaths are their own, like that's their own category.
So
Um,
I'm throwing this out here. I actually don't blame Alicent almost at all in regards to how her children are kind of ending up, because even as a woman in her position, the queen, so obviously she's able to support them financially just fine, but being like at this point because of Viserys' health, she's pretty much a single mother. Viserys is can
yeah,
and I'm not trying to dogpile on Viserys and make him seem like a bad father. Viserys at this is
no,
very sickly and whatnot. There's very little he can do probably, and so
he's a
it's
walking corpse.
yeah, and it's difficult. Like single parent households are just difficult, no matter if you're a man or a woman. Having both, just makes that kind of raising so much easier, as you can both just kind of handle it in different ways, and it just molds the children in a better way. So I don't blame Alicent too much
Yeah.
for the kids, nor do I blame Viserys. It's just, even though the missing of Viserys is what I think probably is what makes these kids particularly more demonic, at least in the show. I will say though, Alicent like grabbing them by the cheeks and going, "You're going to die" when she takes over, probably didn't help their growth in a sustainable manner that much.
No, no. She was particularly hysterical there. But on the other hand, she needed to reinforce the idea, you got kids to think
Mm-hmm.
of.
Well, that was even before Aegon had
Oh,
kids in the show.
yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments though is at the drift mark when they're having the funeral. Like Aemon snitches on Aegon and Otto finds him drunk. He just walks on down, kicks the little bastard, and gets him up.
Yeah, that was a good scene. Then you've got. No, I'm just being honest. That was
No,
a good
I
scene.
know. Yeah, I like.
Helena seems a little frightened of her mother.
Helena's a weirdo.
Like in the show, I'm just gonna be honest. It's pretty evident she's got some prophetic abilities.
Oh yeah, like she's some sort of like in the north, like
Seer.
these kind of thing is like green seers. I don't know if there's really akin to it for the Seven or the Valerian cultures, but yeah, she's got some sort of propheticness to her, which did not exist in the books. But
Yeah, she's clearly in the show basically Cassandra from Greek mythology,
mm-hmm.
and this has damaged her psyche in some way.
Yeah, she's
and
luckily with age she seems much more functional. Like she actually seemed like a normal human being when they were all having dinner.
Yeah, yeah, and I like her little jab at Aegon. But the trouble is, well, funny enough, now we get to, I believe, Darren, I think it is, or Daron. How do you pronounce his name?
Oh, the youngest son?
Her, yeah. With him, I will actually defend Alicent and say, at least in the book, she did a great job with parenting him. Like, he seems pretty good. Like, he's a good start.
Well, yeah,
And
that's
she
probably
had him
because
foster
her and Viserys weren't the one raising him. They just sent his ass to Old Town.
And his uncle took really good care of him, and like he became a pretty well-adjusted adult.
Mm-hmm. Why couldn't
And,
he have been the king?
like, yeah, he probably should have been.
What's that? What's the succession law if the youngest child inherits?
Oh, I can't. I think ultimogeniture.
Yes, ultimate genitor. It's called ulti because obviously it's the ultimate way of inheritance.
You say that as a youngest sibling. Well,
no,
I'm the youngest sibling of my.
I'm actually not. I do have a younger brother.
Okay, so under that inheritance law, I think I would inherit. So yeah, okay, I'm on board with it.
I don't need no damn inheritance. My brother's like a bit rough around the edges, so he can have it all. I'll build my own shit.
Okay. Well, I'm joking there, but Darren, if he appears in the show, they'll probably just mention that he was in Old Town the whole time as a Crowley line, which, the way is open for that.
Yeah, I
would hope that they.
I think he is going to be in the show. I think it's been confirmed that he's going to be in the show.
Okay, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I like him.
Yep. The only one who I think isn't going to be in the show is a Velaryon that makes a bastard Velaryon that comes up later. But we'll save that for another video. But I think we've kind of covered a whole lot in regards to Rhaenyra. Is there anything in particular you want to dive into? Because I'm drawing a bit of a blank.
Let me see. As an archetype, Alicent is the wicked stepmother. She's also. Okay. Okay, one other thing with show versus book.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing. Now, the show did cover one thing um, with Viserys' death that I like more, to an extent. Now, I like the idea that he passed away to his illness. On the other hand, the book, I'm not going to lie, leaves it pretty like I guess I saw Robert Baratheon Viserys Targaryen parallels and thought that Viserys may have been poisoned that last night of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And as Alicent and the Greens had decided, like he's living for too long. Like it's time he's got to go because we got to put Aegon on the throne. Like, because you don't want Rhaenyra to come along with her dragons and cement her control over the city at some point down the road. Although that doesn't look like it's going to happen immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer Viserys lives, in the book at least, the impression you get, the stronger Rhaenyra's claim will be. And to an extent. So the impression I got was, in the book, he may have been poisoned by the Greens. Now, in the show, clearly he wasn't. And instead, it's the illness, although Daemon seems to believe that. Well, this is where I'm going to say Daemon's a biased character who wants to believe Viserys was poisoned so that he could justify everything he does.
Yeah.
And the other thing the show kind of convinced me of, and I never even thought of this real quick, is what is going on between. And this was something that I found funny in thinking about and going over a bit of the book before coming into this collab. Is what is going on between Kristen Cole and Alicent. And I may as well go mushroom here and say there's something going on there. And say that I find that a little funny that in the book at least Alicent would accuse Rhaenyra of getting with Kristen Cole. When in the show you kind of get the impression that Alicent may end up hooking up with him or something at some point. That would be funny. I know I have a sick sense of humor, but it's like, haha, you're a hypocrite. Is my thoughts.
I don't get any of that. I would be surprised if they did try to shoehorn in any sort of kind of romantic or sexual situation between Alicent and Kristen.
Oh, I never meant to say there was anything romantic.
Oh, okay. Just sexual.
Just physical, yeah. And my view of it was it would be funny if she became that much of a hypocrite against Rhaenyra to an extent. And I do think there would be a bit of hypocrisy there,
I mean, it depends on how the show would handle it and how they play about it, because, I mean, even the worst ideas can be good if the journey's great, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't see that happening. I think that might just overcomplicate things in an already fairly complicated situation.
True, but the green I want to see the most are Psychotic Aemond and Daeron.
Yeah, Aemon's going to be fun. I already love him. He's entertaining. He's still a bastard, but he's entertaining. Yeah. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to, and I do hope we get to see Daeron. And there's a lot of characters. Without getting into spoilers, I really want to meet Hugh the Hammer. He's, I'm just.
He's such a.
I know, but I'm a sucker for just the big burly bastards. Alrighty. But with that all squared away, I think we did a pretty handily good job talking about Alicent and pretty much everything else around Alicent.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about, the difference between her and the books, our preferences in one way or the other, the relationship. Oh, here's something that might drag it out a little bit. So
I was thinking about my theory. Sorry, real quick. My theory was that Daeron may not have been Viserys's, and that Alicent had jumped the fence. That was one of my theories, and that was just something I know I'm reading it from too many different perspectives, and just for sick, demented fun with a mushroom way. But it's just like, she's accusing Rhaenyra of all your kids are bastards, and I think it would be funny if one of her kids was also one, and it's like. You're one to talk.
I mean, who knows? Maybe
that's why.
Maybe when we're introduced to Darren, he'll be black, and it's like, eh.
Yeah, that'd be funny. But
But
I think in the show they always make it the Saracens. They should.
mhm. But with that, so there is
I'm
one.
partially trolling.
So there is kind of one more aspect that I feel like we probably want to delve into a little bit, and it's actually like the relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra when they were younger. Because obviously they were aged up. I think both were 18 at the start of the show, give or take a couple of years. And apparently, and now I don't hold a whole lot of credence to this because just because this is how the actor felt like it should be portrayed doesn't mean it. But apparently, and I don't know if it was both actresses, but one of them said, like, especially the scene when they're out reading by the werewood, which I don't think should be there, but anyways, there was supposed to be like some strong romantic tension between them. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought they were just like, I don't know, maybe sisters or something.
Yeah.
Like,
So I got,
like best friends.
I definitely got the same feel as you did. I didn't see much like romanticism or anything. I know my friend DJ Fella felt like, nah, they're gay. They want a scissor.
I don't get it. I don't see it. Okay. I didn't even know that was a fear or thing. Like, the thought never occurred to me. Like, it's not like Leonor where I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Okay. Or the youngest Baratheon. I always forget his bloody name. From Game of Thrones. He's clearly
Renly.
homosexual. Renly, thank you. Sorry, he's just so insignificant. I never bother remembering his name.
Oh, poor Renly.
Well, he's so insignificant. What's the point of him? I'm joking. But, well, okay, actually, he does serve a role. I know, but he just doesn't register in my brain. I guess I'm like Tywin that way. But oh no, I'm becoming Tywin Lannister. Oh well, better to try to do a barrel roll and try to become Kevin. But no, I didn't get that impression. I thought they were like I kind of got the impression it was almost like a nagging older sister and a semi-irresponsible younger sister type of bond. Like Alicent's the responsible one trying to mentor and help do right by Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra is flouting her authority to an extent.
Yeah, and I think I'm in complete agreement with you. I didn't really know about it until I looked up some like of the actors' commentary on some of the on the show, and
I had no idea.
yeah, I mean maybe the actress just has some secrets with her sister she doesn't want to share. Maybe she's more Targaryen than we thought. But anyways,
I don't know. Who knows?
With that all squared away, though, I think that does touch on most all the interesting topics about the two. I mean, we could go into, like, visual differences, but she was blonde in the books, maybe. We're not sure. But I think...
Well, she's kind of brunette in some pictures. I like her being brunette.
I think all the images of her, unless there's been some that... Because I know they just released Fire and Blood. Oh, wait, no, you are correct. That's weird. So it said but this picture is old. I remember seeing this before the pictured Fire and Blood. That's something I probably need to do. I need to look up and maybe I should finally penny up and buy the new Fire and Blood book just so I can skim through it and see all the images.
I just want a part 2 so we get Robert Baratheon.
Definitely that would be good. But with that, we've stretched on long enough. I think it's about time we can call it here. So, of course, Thank you again, the Brothers Kern, for stepping in and having this discussion with me. If you all have enjoyed this, please, as a reminder, like, share, subscribe, but check out the description down below so you can be organized over towards his channel. He covers all sorts of topics. I'm more of a Game of Thrones, but he's gone into Conan, Zelda, all sorts of other fantasies that I'm sure you'll all enjoy.
Yep. So... thank you for hosting, Jasper. As always, you were great.
Alrighty. And with that, everyone else, be safe, and I'll see you all next time.